Welcome back. 2001 Ford Explorer Sport Trac. Needs front brakes, pads and rotors. It was metal to metal on the passenger side. I believe it is on the driver's side as well. So we're just going to go through yet another brake video. Front brakes on this Explorer Sport Trac. Got the wheel turned, tires off, so you can just see this so I can get at it better. It lets me get at these two mounting bolts to hold the bracket, the caliper bracket on. When they're turned straight, they kind of jam up in here, and even now, they will a little bit, but they're a little easier to get to, so I always turn the wheel. We're going to push that piston in back in a little bit, screwdriver here somewhere, so we can free it up from the rotor. Stick a screwdriver in there, going to pry on it, check your fluid in your master cylinder before you do this. If it's filled right to the top, pull some out of it, take some out. We're just going to push this in, get a hold of it, pry out on it a little bit, push the pistons in. This is a dual piston. Don't need a lot, but you do need to move it. Alright, should be enough. I think these are 13 millimeter. One. Alright, just sit that aside. Should be able to slide this off of here. Should have got enough play in it to get it off of there, I hope. It's not being real nice. There it goes. We'll just set this right up here. If we need to, we can tie it up there, but I'm hoping just to set it up here and leave it for the time being. We'll come back to that. You can see these pads are really rust. This big issue here, as always. And these are pretty much gone. Other side was a little bit worse than this, but these are pretty much gone as well. We're going to reach back in here. Two bolts, one here, 15 millimeter. That's what I have here. Yep, I'm going to break them loose. Try to break them loose. Do something with them. Get in a position where I can break them loose. Yeah, they're not too bad. There's one. There's two. Hold the bracket when you take the second bolt out. Don't fall on the floor. Ask me how I know. Oh, there we go. We're just going to set this aside. We'll come back to this. We're going to do everything here, and then we'll go over to the bench. Then we'll get this ready. Number. I use Reassembling Element 3. That's the rotor. Brake clean. Came up with 1,001 uses. Gotta make sure this is clean. This is actually pretty clean. Usually these are around here pretty corroded. Wait for my compressor to kick off here. I'm going to make sure this is clean. This is very little on it right now, very little corrosion. You come in here with sandpaper, Scotch-Brite, emery cloth, and a cookie wheel, and just clean this. Make sure there's the corrosion, especially around the corner of the flange here. You want to make sure you get that cleaned off. Very little on this. I just want to clean the outside of it. I think this is the truck I did a lot of back, work to the back, new shackles, fixed the frame in it, new brackets, and I believe I greased these before. I think that's why I don't have a big corrosion problem with them. I always grease them. So we're just going to put a thin coat of grease on there. Wheel bearing. I use wheel bearing grease for this. You can just, brake grease is fine if that's all you have. Or wheel bearing grease, thin coat. All it does is keep the corrosion, moisture from getting in there, and corrosion from starting. so it doesn't stick to the rotor when you put it on there. These are fully coated rotors, but if you don't have fully coated rotors, even more important, it doesn't stick to it, so you don't have a hard time getting it off of there. The next person in there just makes it a little easier for them, whether that's you or not. But don't take that long. All right, I just realized I didn't turn my camera on, so I don't know what you missed. Now, I came in here, cleaned the back of these tabs and the face of the pistons. Got any corrosion off of them, I'm just pushing them in. Now, you can push them in with, you know, I have a little tool where you can use a big pair of channel locks, vice grip, C-clamp. They should go in pretty easy. I tend to push on the other one with my thumb as I'm pushing them in because this is a dual and I don't have a dual piston tool. You might want to check your master cylinder reservoir. Make sure it's not full right to the top before you do this so you don't overflow it. I've already checked mine. I have plenty of room in there. All right, you'll feel it bottom out. Okay. If you get a bubble around the dust boot on these, they don't seem to do that. You got to reach in. It gets air in it, and it'll get a bubble. You got to kind of take a pick. You don't want to poke a hole in it, but you want to slide that pick along that metal, along that piston, and go down, and then just pry out a little bit and kind of burp it, let the air out of it. These are fine. Don't need to do that, but if it does it to you, that's what you need to do. Brake clean again. Empty can of brake clean just about now. These might be, I can't tell if these actually have a plastic phenolic, what they call phenolic piston. I don't believe they're actually metal. I cleaned them off anyway because they had a little bit of corrosion on them probably from the back of the pad, but that's one good thing about them, at least. They don't really corrode. All right, so I'm going to take some brake grease. Let me find my brake grease, and I'm going to coat the face of this. Even though they're plastic, I still like to coat them because it helps with noise, vibration, as well as if they're metal, you want to keep the moisture off of them. Keep corrosion from starting in there. Coat the face of that. Then the back of the tabs. Cleaned. Alright, so we're done here. We're going to go over to the bench. I'm going to take my bracket here. Let me back you up. Oh, wrong way. Take the bracket. If the corrosion is real bad, you have to file. You have to take a file and file in here, get any of the heavy corrosion off. These are not very corroded at all, just real light. So I'm going to take it over. I'm going to pull the pins out, and these are both the same, the pins. I'm going to re-grease the pins. Not a ton of grease, but you know, a thin coating. Clean them out. I'm going to go over to the wire wheel, clean all this off, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we finish it up. All right, I've cleaned this up, all nice and clean. Like I said, the corrosion was not bad on these at all. So I just wire wheeled them, but if the corrosion's heavy, you need to get a file in there because the wire wheel won't take it off. Check my boots. Always check your slide pin boots. Make sure they're not dry rotted, they're not cracked. They're okay. So we'll reuse them. And I've got my, this is what I use for metal to metal. It's Permatex Ceramic Extreme brake parts, lubricant. I don't use it for where the boots are, where rubber is, because sometimes some of the different types of rubber will have a problem with this. So, but I do use it for metal to metal. So I'm just going to put a thin coating in here on either end behind where the hardware goes. I don't grease on top of the hardware. It's stainless steel. It's not going to rust. It's the bracket that'll rust behind it, and then it pushes the hardware in, pushes in, pinches the pad. So there's always a big controversy and discussion about that. You can do it however you want to do it. I don't grease on top of the hardware. I just grease behind it where it goes. keep moisture out of there, keep corrosion from starting. So we'll do that. We'll put our hardware on there. Let me grab it here, right here. New hardware. Get this in place here. Okay, get our pads, let's set them in. Should go in there pretty easy. You shouldn't have too much problem. Sometimes they can be a pain, but they're usually pretty good going in. These are pretty good going in so far. I don't want to get ahead of myself because you never know what's going to happen with them. Okay, we'll set in. We'll just set that down. Actually, we can't set that down. So now the slide pins. We put them on a wire right around the top here is where they tend to get corroded, that groove. Clean that out really well. I'm going to put some grease on these. Get a little bit. And I use Permatex silicone brake grease. It has to be brake grease. That's what I use for slide pins. Making a mess here. So you want to get around the top, just a little bit in here where the boot goes, not a lot. You don't want to put too much on these. I'm going to clean some of that off because that's a lot. You just want a thin coat. Put too much, it'll lock them up. You can just kind of does like a hydraulic locking thing going on. I don't know what to call it, but just a thin coat. Come on. These are slide our boot back on. Make sure it goes all the way up to that top, right up, and it gets in that groove, gets a hold of it, right around the top here, and then we'll just slide it back. These are both the same, so it doesn't matter which end they came out of. They're both identical. Push it in there. See that how it's pushing it back out right now? There's a little bit of air in there, so you got to kind of burp it a little bit, get a hold of it. Sometimes you need a little screwdriver or a pick, but I think I can get this one. I think. Famous last word. There it goes. I heard it. So now you see it's collapsed and it stays collapsed. That's the air's out of it. Do the same thing on the other side. Other side. There's not another side. It's just another pin. I did wire wheel these. Just to clean them off. Make sure after I got the grease off them, wire wheel them real quick around the top. Any corrosion, get that out of there. Push this up on. We'll clean our excess off here. We don't need that. Okay. Slide this one in. And that one didn't need to be burnt. Good. So it's ready to go back on. I had to recharge the battery there. I had both my batteries for my cameras were dead. They're just about dead. So it's about 10 seconds for use. An hour later. But I'm going to put the rotor back on here. There we go. Get a see if this will work a little better. I think it will. I want that flush tight up against there. Put a little Loctite on the bolts for the that mount to the the knuckle. Torque specs somewhere I think 52 to 76 or something like that. You can look it up if you're not concerned with it. I'm not that concerned with it. We're going to tighten this, put this back on, hang these bolts back in. Top one lined up here. snug them up, and then I'll tighten and finish them by hand. Make sure our pads are in there, right? Come on, that's not in there, right? A little bit of a pad issue here. Giving me grief. There we go. Knew what it was. Now they're in there. Okay. Rehang our caliper now. Make sure you don't twist your line up. I have it twisted up right now. Make sure you don't twist this flexible line up. It's not what you want. There's a little groove on the flat spot. It fits into the actual caliper. So make sure you get that lined up. These are probably about 20 foot-pounds. I just turned my gun down, my small gun. So I'm going to crush them. Got it. Should move freely, which it does. That's pretty much it. We're going to go in, pump your brakes before you try to drive your car till your pedal gets firm or you'll have a scary moment. We're going to go bed these, which means I'm going to take it out and drive it 40, 60 miles an hour. Slow it down pretty aggressively. Don't come to a complete stop. Kind of cycle that, do that 2 or 3 times. Drive it for a little bit, let it cool off. Repeat that whole cycle maybe 8, 10 times. Let the pads bed to the rotor so they work properly, so they seat themselves. And that's it.